In this video we're going to take a look at part 1 of how you can command and control ARCHICAD. Basically we're going to look at some keys that can be used that are pretty much old school keys that do very simple tasks very quickly. In more recent versions, in the last 10 years or so, there's been other functions introduced that give you shortcuts and give you buttons to do similar things, but actually these old school techniques are still very much valid today and can save a good bit of time. So the first part we're going to look at, command and control, is a bit of a hint. We're going to be looking at the command key if you use a Mac, or, sorry for all those Mac fans out there, I'm using a PC today, so we're going to be talking about the control key. And if you hear me talk about the control key, if you use a Mac, that is completely interchangeable with the command key. It's also sometimes known as the Apple key. There's a few simple things we're going to look at. The first one is just trim. Now there is a trim button somewhere on the interface. We can see it up at the top of the screen here. You pick trim, you trim your element, and that's it, finished. If you want to trim another element, you trim again, trim the next piece. It's quite slow because you're going backwards and forwards and you can only do one at a time. Instead of that, if we just simply hold down, in this case because it's Windows, the control key, or as I said earlier, command on the Mac, you can trim, and this will quite happily chop away elements all day long. What happens is when you control click, it chops from the point closest to where you are to the nearest intersection. So in this case it's trimming away there. If I control click in the middle, then you'll see what it does is it trims to the two nearest points. So in terms of these lines, I could either trim away the middle pieces, or we could come in and tidy up these ends. And literally all I'm doing is holding down the control key and clicking to trim away. So the next one's extend. Now this is a little bit different to trim. Trim, you just literally hold the control key, doesn't matter what tool's active, there's no real rules with it. With extend, and also the following ones, there is a sequence you have to follow. So the first thing is, if I want to extend a beam, I can select the beam, but I must make sure that the beam tool is active in the toolbox. If I'm on a different tool, it won't work. So let me show you what happens if I control click across here. That extends, all nice and easy. If I go to the wall tool and control click, then because I have sounds turned on, we just have noise. It doesn't actually do anything. So I must be on the beam tool. Control click now and it works. We don't have to do one at a time. I can select the whole pile here. I can control click to the wall edge. I can control click to the beam. I can control click to the center line. Whatever I actually choose, as long as there's a linear edge, I can see a Mercedes icon, I control click and it works. If I now want to extend the walls, I must make sure that the wall tool is active. Select what I want to extend, so just shift click, and then control click with the Mercedes icon, preferably the thick Mercedes because that's going to connect to the reference line, and what that does is join up these walls. If we now take a look at break, this comes in handy if I want to do something like maybe change the structure of the wall type in here, or maybe you can see here I've got some sketch lines going across here and here. If I want to change these line types, not the whole thing, what I must do is break the components into smaller pieces that are more manageable. So the process is very similar actually to extend. If I select this top wall, what I can do is look for the bold Mercedes icon. I'm going to control click. This time it's an edge that cuts. So what happens is the wall is broken and ARCHICAD always leaves the shortest side selected. So I can deselect, select here, control click, and it trims that. So this piece of wall in the middle now, I can select, drop into the settings, and let's just change for some other wall type. So you can see because that's broken, this is now changed, but the two ends remain completely intact. If I want to change the colour of the line in here maybe, select this one line, it's one piece right now, but I can control click here, and you'll see a deliberate mistake because I'm not on the line tool, so I've actually just trimmed. So one of the next things we're going to talk about is shortcuts. We'll come on to that, but I'm going to use one right now, which is Control Z for undo. Obviously that was a deliberate mistake. I'll grab the line tool this time. Now I'll select the line that I want to break, and I'll control click again, and because I'm on the line tool, this time I get a break. I'll control click here as well, trims off that piece or breaks that piece. I can then take the bit in the middle and we can just change it to a different line type. So let's maybe have some zigzags. I will change its colour to something else. So quick change there. Similarly, if I take this large line, we can control click here, select that piece, control click up here, and a piece in the middle, again, we can go change to maybe just a different colour this time, just for the sake of change. So the same is true for any of these. If I want to work on the beams, beam tool active, shift click to select, control click where I want to break, select again, control click this piece, and now what I can do is take the middle section that's now broken. We go into the settings, I'll maybe change it to just a regular square beam, make it 4 inches. OK that, and we can see it's now changed. The next one to look at is how we can use the control key with dimensions. So in here you can see I've done a fair bit of messing around. This is the trim exercise I used earlier. I have a couple of dimension lines in place, and like the other options other than trim, if I want to edit a dimension and make sure the dimension line's active. So I can pick this up, so I can select this, and maybe what I want to do is add the corners. So we're going to hold down control, we're going to look for a tick mark, make sure we've got highlight so it's going to associate, click the mouse, and there we go, control click, and that's just added additional points. If I want to add a point that's in the middle, it's a bit like break, then control click, and that adds that one. Control click in here, and that adds that one. And you can literally control click anywhere. So that's a non-associative point because it's just a random point in the middle of nowhere. So again, shortcuts, Control Z is one of these really handy universal undo shortcuts that goes across pretty much all products and all platforms. Can select this dimension line, and we can just add in key points with a simple control click, and it's nice and simple and easy to do. So the last thing I was going to take a look at is some shortcuts, and there's only a couple really to mention, but the first two are very much universal. I've already given the game away, but let's actually look at one before that. So what I'm going to do is I want to select everything. So very, very simple. Control A for all, and that just selects everything on this story or elevation or plan or layout or whatever view is active. Literally, Control A is select all. We can take it a little bit further. We can go maybe to the window tool, and we can do Control A again, and that selects all windows again on this story or view or whatever it is. And then the final step with this is to take a marquee, put it around a particular area. This time we'll go for the object tool, and again Control A selects all objects that are inside or touching the boundary of that marquee. So it's really quite a useful one and pretty basic filter. The next one I've already mentioned, the undo command. If I was to draw something, and decide that once I've done it, I don't want them, I can literally just do Control Z, and that does an undo. So I did it 3 times there to take out the last 3 options. There is a limit to the number of undos. It's also cleared by hitting the save button, but generally undo is your backup plan if things go horribly wrong. Not to confuse with a backup PLN, that's a different thing, but anyways, that'll do for now. So final couple of shortcuts. These are a couple that I personally use all the time, and that's just simple navigation one. So if I'm on my story 0 here and I want to go up a floor, I don't particularly want to go and dig through the folders in the navigator to find what story I want to go on. There's various ways to do that, but I just want to quickly go up a story. So all I do is Control or the Command key on a Mac and just the up arrow. And what that does is, thanks to my very subtle numbering system here, is that moves me up to the floor above. You can also see the naming and the numbering on the name of the tab up here. So Control, up arrow, again takes me up another floor, and again takes me up to the roof. And if we try and go too far, what it'll do is prompt us to create a new story. So I'll cancel that. To go back down, I'll give you 3 guesses to what the shortcut is. So Control up arrow to go up. So naturally, Control down arrow. To go down as far as we can. And again, if I try and go another story, it comes up and prompts to create another new one. Specifically in this case, we're looking at the Shift key and 3 main functions it performs. So the first one is the selection and deselection tool, and this is one of my pet hates really, to be honest. If I'm in the middle of drawing something, one of the things I hate to see is when somebody does this, realise they need to use a different tool, so maybe they cancel, press the escape key, move the mouse up here to the arrow tool to then go and maybe select this table and chairs, do something with it, finish that, and then go back to the tool that we're on before. There's a number of different ways to do that to speed things up, but the first thing is just don't go for the arrow tool in the first place. Use the Shift key. So if I put the mouse over any element and hold down Shift, you'll see in this case the slab is pre-selected. It's highlighting it and it's showing me information about it. It's doing this because the quick select function is active. This detects elements under the mouse and quickly selects. However, that's only one part of the story. So select, hold down Shift, click the mouse, that selects the slab. Fair enough. If I escape to deselect, I can move the mouse around and you'll see it wants to pick up different things and it highlights what those things are. However, there is actually another function in here. If I want to select the zone rather than the slab, if I actually come across here and select the zone tool, then hold down Shift, what you'll see is in each space it wants to select the zone before any other element. So it's a really useful, very basic, but very useful filter. If I grab the slab tool now, hold down Shift, then it looks for the slab elements. And what I'll do is I'll finish with the object, and you'll see what it wants to do is filter out objects before any other elements. So if I grab the object tool, we can select a bunch of objects. It's going to do that before anything else. If I just hold down Shift and draw a selection window, same as we would with an arrow, it picks everything up in there. If there's bits that I don't want selected, Shift does deselect in exactly the same way. So I hold down Shift and I pick what I don't want. So get rid of that table, get rid of these 2 zones, and maybe deselect the stair. So we can select and deselect as much as we like. The next thing Shift is good for is as a constraint tool. And again, this is an old school type control. If I grab the wall tool and come down here and go to draw a piece of wall, we have our guidelines and our active guides and various bits that we can use to snap to different reference points. But an old school method is just hold the Shift key. And what that does, I'm holding it down just now, you see wherever the mouse goes, the wall is actually constrained to the horizontal in this case. If I let go of Shift, let it come round to a different angle, we can do that again, or we can slide up and down and just choose anything else. So it's actually quite useful. It means I can hold down Shift and we can actually bring the mouse up to some point across the other side of the building and click. And that will use whatever point I've clicked on as a reference, but keep the wall constrained to the original axis. So we could come up here slightly, draw another piece from there, bring that across and maybe line it up with the end of the bed for some reason. And it saves us having to do the newer methods where we wait for the active guides and things to appear and use the reference lines. If we want to change the angles that this snaps to, we can do so in the work environment by going to Input, Constraints and Guides. And in here you can see we have horizontal vertical, we have a parallel to the grid, and we can also switch on an incremental angle. So we can actually make this 45 for example, hit OK, and now when I move the mouse around, if I hold shift, we're snapped to horizontal, we can snap to vertical, but we can also snap to the 45 and the 135 angles as well. So it's quite a quick way of aligning things. The final option to take a look at with the shift key is when it's used as a shortcut modifier. Depending on your keyboard shortcuts, you might use shift to create copies, for example, so Control or Command D for drag, and maybe Shift, Control or Command D for drag a copy. In this case, the most useful one I find is the shortcut to allow you to orbit around the model. Another one of my pet hates is having to find and use the orbit command, either here or with the keyboard shortcut O. But instead of doing any of that, if I come up here, anywhere in the middle of the screen, hold down the wheel, I can pan. Instead of doing that, if I use the modifier, which is shift, and then hold down the wheel, this time it quickly takes me to orbit, and I can reposition the model wherever is required. As soon as I let go of shift and let go of the wheel, I'm ready to start working. Whereas using either of the other options, you have to come out of those options to then begin and start working. Using the Alt key. The Alt key works as a modifier for other combinations of keys or clicks, and we're going to run through and look at some of the main functions it performs. So the first one we'll look at is one of the most essential ones in ARCHICAD. Is how we can pick up and set the defaults for a tool. So the way it works, let's zoom in. If I move across to a wall here, for example, hold down the Alt key, you can see it highlights, and that's what's going to be selected. So if I now click again, another little flash, but you can see the wall tool is now active, and I have an external wall as the type selected here. If I Alt click on an internal wall, you'll see the defaults change, and I now have an internal. So basically what this means is if I draw a little piece of wall, I have an internal wall. If I Alt click on this wall, I now get an external wall, and we can even do this with any element at all. So I can actually Alt click on a door, and now the default door type is the single door. So as I say, we can Alt click on any element, and that will capture all of the settings and set them as default. So the next logical step is once we've actually picked up settings, we want to use them somewhere else. When you're working in a model where you've already drawn and created lots of data, there's often times when you need to modify something to make it look or appear the same as something else that's already done. And there's no point going through the process of setting everything again manually. So what we can do is show an example here. If we zoom in, here's a good example because I've got lots of different types of wall construction that's going to visually show what happens. So the first step is we pick up parameters. So let's just go grab this internal wall. And what I maybe want to do is change this party wall to be just a single partition. I'm sure the structural engineer will have nothing at all to say about that. But anyway, so all we do is hold down Alt, but this time because I'm in Windows, I'm also going to hold down the Control key. If you were on a Mac, you would hold down the Command key with the Alt key. And all we do is we highlight the element we want to inject the parameters to, click the mouse, and it's done. So I literally just Alt Control and click. So to do that again, let's pick up a party wall from here. So Alt click, and then Alt Control or Alt Command click, and that transfers the parameters into that other highlighted element. This works with all sorts of elements. So I can pick up from one door and inject into a different one. Maybe I'll undo that because that's probably not what we want in our dining room. The one thing you need to remember when you're using the inject or transfer parameters option is you can only do this within elements of the same type. So you can take settings from one wall to another wall, you can take it from one slab to another slab, you can take it from object to object, but you cannot go from a door to a window or from an object to a stair, or from a wall to a slab. They must be the same type. This next function is an old school one. Basically, on occasion you may want to move the origin within a view, and what we can do is use a button that's located up here on the top of the screen. That you click and then you go choose where you want to move the origin to. But instead of doing that, if you know the keys and your hand's near the left hand side of the keyboard, Alt Shift, whether it's Mac or PC, Alt Shift, and you'll see what that does is very quickly shift the origin to wherever the mouse happens to be. As long as I have a tick mark or an intersection symbol, we can move the origin. So I can drop it to this bottom corner, we can move it to the paving, we can move it to the top of the door, we can move it to the base of the light, whatever we want. It's just Alt Shift to shift it around to wherever we need it to be. The last function to look at with the Alt key is its use as a shortcut modifier. There's a few of these, but there's actually only a few of them I use on a regular basis. The first one that's really quite a useful one to know is Alt and F2. And what that does is, as you can see with the drawing frame, as I click it on and off, that enables or suspends the trace and reference function. Another one I use quite a lot, is probably the one I use the most, is to enable or suspend grouping. I've zoomed in on this area so you can see what this shortcut does. As I say, it's one of my favourites. If I select this table, you'll see it's selected individually, but it shows based on the corner points that this is actually part of a group. What I can do is very quickly Alt-G, and what that does is enable grouping, and it then picks up the other elements that are in the same group as the selected elements. So I've gone from one element to 6 elements. I can now move that as a group. If I want to move something individually, Alt-G again, that suspends the groups, and I can then reselect whatever the element is, maybe move it across slightly. If I do my Alt-G to reactivate grouping, you'll see this is now back acting as one set of grouped elements, and it behaves in that way. So it's just a nice simple filter. Alt-G to switch grouping on and off. I've zoomed to this different area so we can show this example. This is Alt-E, E for element snap, and what it allows me to do is, if I've got something selected and I start to maybe drag, for example, you'll see there's the various node points that highlight, and what that wants to do is snap to other elements. And if you're in a particularly busy bit of a drawing, and if you're in a detailing stage and there's lots of things going on, that can actually get in the way of things. So a simple Alt-E suspends that, and you'll see there's now no snapping. Alt-E enables it again, and I can snap and actually put these chairs completely back to back, for example. There's a pile of other shortcuts that the work environment uses depending on your settings. You can check those by going to Options, Work Environment, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then you pick this button down here, and this will generate a list of all the shortcuts in use by your ARCHICAD. We're going to look at the fourth keyboard shortcut that can be used. This is probably one of the easiest keys to find on the keyboard because it's the biggest key there is and it's right there in the middle, and that is the spacebar. As with all the other keys we looked at, there's lots of different functions it can perform, but in this video I'm going to pick out just 4 examples to give you a taster of what can be done. So the first function of the spacebar is the magic wand. Way back in the early days of ARCHICAD, there was no magic wand tool. There was only what was known as the spacebar click. And that allows you to transform one set of placed elements into another set depending on what tool's active. So the first example I'm going to show is actually using the marquee tool. And it's set for a thick marquee, and you'll see here I've got this red sketch polyline that's drawn across the building. That's a closed polygon, so I can easily trace it with the marquee. And all we do is good old hold down spacebar, you'll see the magic wand icon appears, and we just put the mouse over the polyline, click the mouse, and the marquee appears. It's not really a transformation, but what it is doing is allowing me to create a shape that's not possible using just the regular drawing methods available in the Marquee tool. It could be done, but it wouldn't be too easy, and it would be difficult to replicate. But now I've done that, all I need to do is press the good old F4 if it's a Mac, F5 if it's a PC. And what that does is show me the content of the 3D window, now nicely cut with the Marquee tool. This is a more traditional example of where the spacebar click or the magic wand can be used. We have a polyline spline outline for a site. We have a slab that's been drawn to show the footprint of a building, and we can use the magic wand and the spacebar to transform these elements into new elements. So I'll start with the wall tool. We'll just grab the wall, hold down space, move to the edge of the slab. The magic wand symbol changes, click the mouse, let go of space, and by magic our walls have appeared. I can then grab a roof, repeat the process, so hold down space, move over the edge, click the mouse, let go of space, and the roof appears. If I want to put a site in place, so grab the mesh, set the favourite, hold space, move across, highlight, click, let go, and it's finished. If I grab the marquee again, we can put a marquee around this whole area, and we can have a look at this wonderful architectural creation. It's very secure right now, no doors or windows or anything like that, but I'm sure you'll agree we've very quickly transformed a 2D outline for the site and a floor slab into something that's a lot more detailed. So this next example of where we use the spacebar is a little bit different. It's a toggle in this case, but it's something that I actually use quite a lot. If I zoom in on this dining area, I'll grab the arrow tool and I want to select the table and 6 chairs. If I just use the arrow tool and try and select, then what you'll actually see is happening is I am dragging a slab, because if I come back out of there and I deselect the slab, you'll see straight away as the mouse is over an element, it recognises the fact there's a slab there and it tells me the information about the slab. That can be a bit of a pain because I want to do a selection window. So here the space, all we do is hold it down, and you'll see what it does is immediately disable quick select. So going back a step, quick select is this little icon, this button up here, and right now it's in the on position. So if the mouse, whatever tool we're on, or even if we use the shift key, which is one of the previous videos, but whatever we use to try and select something, straight away the little magnet icon appears, and ARCHICAD is telling us that there's something below the mouse and it's giving us information about it. So even if I'm using the shift key, I can still hold space, and that disables quick select. So I'm then free to go around, select this without worrying about picking up anything else that's underneath there. Alternatively, if you're not a fan of quick select, which I have worries about that if you're not a fan because it's amazing, but that aside, if you were to switch off quick select, move the mouse across here, I'm on the arrow tool, it doesn't detect anything underneath because quick select is turned off, but this time if I hold space, what it does is it inverts the selection. So you'll see quick select now appears and I can quickly select the slab. You'll actually see if I move the mouse up here to the info box, if I hold space, you'll see quick select activates. When I let go of space, it deactivates. If I switch it on, space switches it off, let go of space, it comes back on. So it's just a really nice quick toggle. The last example where we use the spacebar here is with element snap. Element snap is this button here, we need to make sure that's switched on in the first place. And again, if I zoom in on this same dining area, what I'm going to do is pick up a chair, and I'm just going to right click, move, drag a copy, and you'll see as I start to move this, you'll see there's various points up here. Let's go for a free space and not move the mouse. You see there's lots of points have appeared around the boundary of that chair and on various key points inside it. If I move to a corner here roughly, what you'll see start to happen is the bottom left corner is now highlighted because element snap has detected there's a corner point on the chair, can snap to a corner point on the table. If I go to a busier part of the drawing though, so maybe about there, what it's actually showing is that I've got one snap which is active right now, which is the bold one. There's also another possible one in the lower left corner, and if I press space, I can actually toggle between these. But what I'll do is probably more obvious if I put the mouse here. And you'll see in this case we've actually got 4 options. So I can press space. You'll see the position jumps slightly depending on which one's active. So it's a really quite useful tool. So it's a pretty simple tool to use, and it's not difficult to find the key because, as I say, it's the biggest one on the keyboard.